G'day guys, and welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today's episode is going to be all about go-kart overtaking tips. Now, as we know, karts getting faster, tracks are getting a little bit wider as well. So hopefully you got a lot more opportunities to overtake your opposition. So let's get stuck into it. Okay, so the first tip that we've got when it comes to go-kart overtaking tips is that you need to have confidence. Now, it's easy to say, go and get some confidence. You can't just go and buy it from the local kart shop. So it's all about trying to map out on which parts of the racetrack it's going to be safest to make the overtake. So in most instances, looking for the main straights. That presents the most amount of time and the best opportunity when it comes to overtaking. It allows the driver who's in behind to actually get the slipstream. So that means they're going to have more momentum. They get the slipstream, their kart's going to be traveling at a faster speed, and they've got plenty of ample time to pull out and then weigh up the decision whether they can actually go for the overtake or then elect to maybe pull out and wait for another corner. When drivers are trying to gain the confidence, what happens is they're focusing on that kart in front of them and not actually looking for the gap that they're trying to drive in towards. So when you're looking for an overtake, don't look at the go-kart, look for where you're driving and where that big amount of space is. Now what you're going to notice is it's a pretty big space that you've got on most corners or most straights. And that's where the safest point, if you're looking there, you're going to drive there. So confidence is key. If you actually can't quite make the pass, just elect to just wait and look for another spot on the racetrack to try and make that same overtake. It could be in the same corner next lap, or it might be in one or two corners time that you have enough speed to pull out and overtake. So just be mindful of that. And if you are going to commit to this overtake, focus on the gap rather than the kart that you're trying to pass. That's our first tip. Okay, so the second tip that we've got in our go-kart overtaking tips episode is you've got to have to accelerate faster out of the corners. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to set up the overtake maybe one or two corners before you get to the place that you want to pass your opposition. Now, what I see a lot of drivers is, and this is why they get into a lot of crashes, is because they're not really thinking in advance. All of a sudden they see a gap and they just go for it and they haven't actually weighed up whether that's an opportunity to pass or it's just a dumb decision. And now, sometimes it might come off and you might look like a superstar as well. But chances are, if you actually set up the pass, so you know that at a certain hairpin or in a certain part of the straight, the driver that you're around is lacking that in that position on the racetrack. You might have a different sprocket, so you've got more straight line speed. You might notice the driver in front of you starts to brake a little bit earlier on a particular corner. So when you're driving, you've got to try and start analysing the drivers that you're around and see where opportunities start presenting themselves. So when I'm following the opposition, I'm trying to weigh up maybe two or three corners in advance going, okay, if I get this corner right and I set myself up nicely, get on the accelerator nice and early, build up my momentum a lot faster than the competitor that I'm around, all of a sudden when I get to this corner in two or three corners time, that's when I'm going to pass. So I've already sort of committed to that pass two or three corners before I've actually got there. So what happens is I go around the corner, go to the next corner, and then bang, an opportunity's presented itself. Because for the last 2 or 3 or 4 laps that I've been following a driver, I've seen they've made the same mistake on that same corner 2 or 3 times before. So knowing that when I'm ready to commit, they're going to make the same little mistake or they're going to brake a little bit earlier than what I'm capable of doing, and that's where the opportunity presents itself. So setting up the pass nice and early, 2 or 3 corners in advance, even sometimes a lap before. You know, next lap, I'm going to pass this competitor on that part of the racetrack. And then what happens is you start mapping it out 2 or 3 corners in advance, and all of a sudden, it's a lot safer opportunity to overtake. Okay, so our third tip in our go-kart overtaking tips episode is watching other competitors. Now, sometimes you're on a practice day, and there might be just no karts on the track, so then it's going to be very hard to watch and see what other drivers are doing. But if you're at a race event, watch maybe 2 or 3 races before you go out and see where other drivers are making overtakes. Now, some corners on the racetrack, they're too fast and they're not really actually a corner. They're just like these little kinks or little bends in the track. So you might find that no one's really passing on those spots on the track. Unless something goes wrong with the kart in front and they're fouling a plug or they've dropped a wheel into the grass and their momentum's been lost. But you can start to pinpoint maybe 2 or 3 spots per lap on a racetrack that you can overtake because you're seeing it happen before you go out. So if you're watching, like I said, 3 classes before you and 80% of the overtakes happen on a corner, then you know that when you go out, that's probably going to be the most logical chance for you to try and overtake. So what you're going to notice is there's a lot of kids that just look on their iPad, or they're off rolling down hills or kicking the football, whatever it may be. Then there's some other competitors who are on the fence watching other karts around them, other races. And they're the ones who can pick up these little 1%ers that when it comes to race time, they're making the better decisions. Now, it's not to say that you need to watch every single race, but if you're lacking a little bit of confidence and you don't quite have that, that go to try and pass, watch other competitors and you can see it being done right in front of you. So at least it gives you a bit more self-belief that when you hit the racetrack for the first time or in that race later on the day, that if other competitors are able to pass in those spots on the track, then there's no reason why you can't pass in the same spots. Okay, so our fourth tip when it comes to our go-kart overtaking tips is when you're trying to make a pass, most of the time it's going to be into a braking zone. So knowing that, you need to be confident in your own car. So what I mean by that is some brakes are quite touchy. So as soon as you hit the brakes, bang, the back end starts to slide around on you. So straight away, I don't have the confidence. If I'm traveling at 100 k's an hour on the straight, I'm trying to go into a late braking zone and the cart's already getting twitchy on me. Am I really going to make that, that overtake? On the flip side, it's that you're using the brakes and it takes you a very long time to slow down because they're not quite engaging that well, or, whatever it may be, the pads might be a little bit worn down. So it's just taking you a greater time to bring that speed down. So you're trying to think, if the guy I'm trying to pass is braking over here, well, I can't quite brake there because I always have to brake back a little bit because it takes me a little bit longer to slow down. So really knowing what you're working with is going to help you with it to make better decisions. Because, like I said, if your car takes a long time to slow down and the person you're trying to overtake is already right on the edge of their limits, then it's probably not a wise idea for you to overtake and then have a crash, the potential for a crash to happen. So, like I said, once you know what you're working with, you can then adjust your brakes or put shims in it to make it work either quicker, or you can take them out and make them work slower, whatever it may be, but have confidence in your own kart because you're making split-second decisions at high speeds. The tip number 5, and our last tip on our overtaking tips, is focusing on the gap. Now, we did touch on it very early in tip 1, but what I mean by that is when you're trying to overtake, you got to use the go-kart that you're overtaking and use them in your peripheral vision. So what I'm trying to say is I'm looking at the gap where I'm going to be turning a left-hand corner, and I can still see that kart in my vision, but I'm not focusing my attention because I need to be focusing on where I'm going to drive and where I'm trying to make that overtake. Now, a lot of drivers, why they can't overtake is because they're focusing on the kart right in front of them. And so they're not actually seeing this big gap appearing right there. And so what that does is when you're limiting your vision, you're not going to go for those opportunities because you think, I can't actually make that pass stick. So it's actually using your vision a lot more than what you think. That's going to present so many more opportunities when it comes to overtaking. Now, it still comes back to having confidence, but keep focusing for those gaps on the track. Now, as we're saying, most tracks are going to be 8 meters wide. And so your go-kart, what's the rear track at 1400 or 50? What I'm saying is it's only about a quarter to less than a quarter, a sixth of the racetrack is a little go-kart. So then you've got basically 3/4 of the racetrack to fit your little go-kart into. It presents a lot more opportunities than what drivers actually think. But because their vision is very, very tunneled and it's very, very focused in on a small gap, drivers don't tend to go for these overtakes. So as soon as you start looking and broadening your horizon, okay, there's a lot bigger gap than what I actually ever envisioned, straight away you start to at least looking for those overtakes. Now, it might not come off every time, but at least if you're looking for bigger gaps, the chances are you're going to make it stick. Now, I just thought about it. I thought, you know what, we're done on the go-karting tips, but I remembered that one thing that really has stuck with me my whole racing career, and it's what Dad sort of instilled me from the very, very start. Outside suicide. So what he meant by that is, it's always way more dangerous to look for an overtake on the outside than what it is towards the inside. Now, why that is because the driver who you're trying to overtake is generally, well, you'd hope so, they're looking to where they're going to drive. So if they're looking to left-hand side, turn left-hand corner, and a kart is overtaking towards the inside, they can then start to see where that kart is. Now they can continue to turn in and contact can be made, or they can actually turn out of the overtake and allow that kart to slip by them. But if you're looking over here and there's a driver going around the outside of you, they can't see you. So naturally as they come out of the corner or they start to use more of the racetrack, poof, they go into the outside go-kart without even meaning to do that. So he always reminded me, because I used to come off the track quite a bit because I was trying to overtake everywhere. He was like, you got to overtake here, you got to overtake there. And I was trying to overtake wherever I possibly could, inside, outside, freaking over the top. But what you're trying to say is that the outside presents a lot higher risk. Yes, it can be done. There's no reason to say that you can't overtake on the outside. But when you're trying to calculate whether it's the smartest decision in a race, probably not. Hence why we're saying that 90% of overtakes are always towards the inside. There's more racetrack available, and that's where the drivers that you're overtaking are looking towards. So that's it on today's episode on go-kart overtaking tips. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and just remember to click subscribe to our channel so don't miss any future episodes on our Kart Class YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Cheers.